I'll go back to my regular view by clicking on the graph editor icon again. Now I'm going to draw a second shape. So this one has disappeared nicely. Give it a little pause. And I'll press B for beginning, so preview my work area here. I'll rename this layer. Now at a second mark, I can option bracket out to clip that at a second. I'm going to advance my playhead to the 15, second 15, and I'm going to add another shape layer. 5-frame pause. I'm going to option bracket in to trim that to this point. And then start press B for my work area to start there. So now I've got this area to play with. And I'm going to select the title of the layer, press return so I can rename it rectangle. So I'm going to go up to my rounded rectangle selection tool here for the shapes. Rounded rectangle. I'm going to draw a shape here. Now this one's purple. I can do red if I want. Let's make that red. All right, so this will be red. I'm going to align it to the center again. Control click. And center my anchor point. I'm going to go into my rectangle here. You can see I have an additional menu item here from size and position. I also have roundness, so I can actually increase the roundness of that. I'll make a keyframe at the start. Half second, so that's 15 frames. Make another keyframe. 200. And then back to there. So now this shape is going to transform from a square to more of a rounded, almost circle, and back out again. This shape is transforming on the contents, on the rectangle. Let's also transform it and use a little rotation as well. This is where it's important to have your anchor point centered, right? I'll put a keyframe there. So I'll press U so I can just see those two things, right? And you can see that the contents, like the shape on the layer, this is indented a little bit. And the layer line animations are all a little further out. Their margin is a little more to the left. So I'm going to add a little anticipation here, right? So I'm going to draw this back a little bit, maybe, or start it here as it starts to transform. So maybe do -15 on the rotation. And these numbers here are degrees, and these are complete revolutions on the left-hand side. So there's a 0. I don't want to go too far. I just want to have it kind of tilt and then spin, right? So it's going to start its little action, right? Degree. And then get to the 0 mark. So I'm going to push it all the way to +40. It's going to swell out. And then back again, right? To 0. So let's preview that. A little more dynamic to have some countervailing motion. The one thing that I'm looking at, though, is it still looks a little bit robotic because I have linear keyframes. So let's select them all. And then I'm going to use function F9 on my Mac to just easily hotkey command them into beziers. So that's a new way to do it. You could also still control click, keyframe assistant, easy ease if you'd like, but I like hotkeys. So it's function F9 on a Mac. And I'm looking at this, and the animation is, the secondary animation is that rotation. If I want this to feel a little less robotic, let's take that secondary animation. And I'm going to move these keyframes around a little bit so they're not right on top of one another, so that there's an independence to the action. Now I'm just going to preview that. Now it has a little more life, right? It kind of bounces a little more because my keyframes aren't right on top of one another. Little tip is to move your keyframes off of one another if you have a secondary animation like slow in, slow out, or this little anticipation. To really help make it feel less robotic. Now let's add a third element to this. Add in some squash and stretch. So you remember that's kind of like the vertical and horizontal outlines of the shape, how they transform. So maybe as it goes this way, let's actually hit the keyframes again. I'll hit size with this unlocked here. Very important, because you don't want to proportionally alter the size. You don't want it just to shrink and grow like the other one did. You want to control the X and the Y axes independently. So I'm going to hit U on my keyboard. So now I've got size and roundness that are in the contents stack and then the layer line rotation. But here I'm just going to make sure that this, so we'll start proportionately. So I'll start 1 there at the beginning, and then maybe it'll kind of see what this looks like. That's the, actually, let's have it grow vertically, right? So now I get this kind of thing, and then it's going to spin. So it kind of grew in anticipation, and let's have it shrink to there. Why not? And then let's have it get a little wider. Here. So let's preview that. So now I've got another element, another principle of animation applied. Squash and stretch. Let's make these easy ease keyframes, function F9. And I could just offset these a little bit. Beautiful. One thing I might want to do is look at my rotation under the graph editor. So I select it, and I'm just going to pull these handles out even more, because that'll benefit from being a little exaggerated. So just pulling the curves out a little bit, so stretching those out. So now I've got my shape where I'm altering the roundness of it, the roundness of the corners. I've applied a layer line rotation. The Bezier handles have stretched out with the graph editor. And I've got a squash and stretch applied by altering the size independently.